So I am very pessimistic about the use of SRM or any geoengineering technology at all, except for potentially air capture, where effectively we reverse what we've done. We take out of the atmosphere what we've put into the atmosphere. I'm pessimistic about it for a bunch of reasons that I'll get into in just a moment, but I can't imagine the circumstances in which it would be appropriate to proceed with SRM. And I think arguably, there may be some circumstances in which it might be appropriate to move forward with some research into SRM, but it just seems to me that those circumstances would have to be basically dire circumstances where we're not capable of adapting, where we have completely failed to mitigate climate change, and where effectively we have no other options at all. But that is basically the escape hatch, it seems to me, for research as well as deployment of SRM. As far as I'm concerned, the most challenging issues that SRM presents are those that are sort of lie underneath the surface a little bit of the SRM debate or the geoengineering debate more broadly. That is to say that most of the time when we talk about geoengineering or we talk about SRM, it seems to me in the public policy universe or in the public policy discourse, we talk about risks, we talk about unintended consequences, we talk about harms from climate change. I think these are all, of course, very important concerns for anybody who cares about well-being, about humanity, about the state of the earth, and so on. But I think that those are not ultimately the deepest concerns. I think the deepest concerns are concerns about the trampling of rights, which is to say that I think that very clearly it could be that if we deploy some project, some SRM project to try to steer the climate in one direction or another, we could end up violating the rights of individuals or individual populations. I think also that it's very clear that we could we could violate individuals not by violating their rights, we could wrong them. So for instance, sometimes when I'm talking about ocean fertilization or SRM or air capture, I use this analogy. You can imagine, for instance, that you leave town for a weekend, that a bunch of people decide for whatever reason that they're going to throw a party on your property. They end up damaging the property, and then you return from your trip to the weekend, but they've renewed your property, made it even better than it was before. I think there's still a sense, even if it's the case that your property was made better in your absence, there's a sense in which you've been wronged by these activities. And I think that we really sort of have to get clear on the extent to which we're wronging others by committing these individual acts and these collective acts that create climate change. And I think there's a sense in which even by bettering the climate, we can do wrong by others. My other concern relates to the extent to which by changing the climate in some way, or by taking effectively the climate reins, we effectively take responsibility for things that may happen because of the fact that we've changed the climate. So another sort of analogous case that I use is the manipulation of rivers or streams. Certainly it is the case that in some circumstances we may want to manipulate the flow of a stream, for instance, for recreational rafting purposes, because there are some hazards on the stream, some very, very bad hazards. Maybe people die. So we may want to manipulate the stream, change the course of the stream. Certainly makes sense to do that in some circumstances. But the moment that we do manipulate the stream, it seems to me we then introduced the possibility that we're responsible for further hazards that are created by our manipulation of the stream. I think that very much is applicable to the geoengineering discussion, and it should be a concern for us too, because very clearly if we move forward with geoengineering anyway, then we suddenly become responsible for otherwise natural hazards, or what might be perceived as natural hazards. And I think, not to mention the sort of the legal morass that introduces, the possibility of legal complications. I think you're just from an ethical standpoint introducing the possibility that you could be responsible for wrongs done by virtue of this sort of general manipulation of the climate. I think the steps we should take to address these ethical concerns are basically to take a lot of steps back, to sort of call off the dogs, to think a little bit more seriously about our ethical obligations to one another, and I think we really need to set up the infrastructure to bring in as many people from as many wide-reaching populations as possible, to have effectively an intelligent discussion about what is appropriate and permissible. I've argued elsewhere that I think that, and I actually don't think this is a form of geoengineering technology, but I've argued elsewhere that technologies like air capture are sort of more ethically permissible insofar as it's reasonable for us to say that we can take away damage that we've done and to a certain extent right the wrongs that we've done by way of removing carbon, let's say, if that's the concern, carbon out of the atmosphere, but effectively moving the state of the universe from point A to some new point that we deem to be better or anticipate to be better, I think that that's not the right kind of discussion to be having right now.